the Marxian vision is an anti-civilization vision. They would say, no, no, we're just trying to make civilization more equitable and whatnot. But it really comes from Rousseau, and the idea is that humans were better off when we lived in harmony with nature, not in this modern way. It's a completely bizarre idea because, of course, everything we understand about, the human history is that it was, red in tooth and claw, to quote from Hobbes. It was a violent, nasty, brutish, and short
Yeah.
life before you get to civilization. Hobbes says we need civilization. You need to have power to protect people. And then you get Locke, who says we need to protect people from the state. That tradition rejects it. I mean, the Rousseauian, Marxian, radical left tradition in Los Angeles absolutely rejects it. With Cuba, the idea is that we're better off all being a lot poorer, and more having more equity. Equity meaning equality of outcome, not of equality of opportunity.
Equality of poverty.
Equality
literally,
of poverty.
you're saying that they
That's
actually
right.
believe in an equality of actual poverty.
That's right.
That be like, no, we're all gonna
Yeah.
be equally rich, and we're gonna take from the capitalists and redistribute it, so we're all better off. Is not even really the underlying vision. The underlying vision is, no, we should be poor. We're a parasite. We deserve to be
Yes.
equally poor.
That's right.
Those things have always seemed like they're kind of in conflict because there's this environmental anti-humanism, but then there is I would even say, like, Bernie Sanders seems like he's a little more just economically oriented, more like, oh no, let's just take Elon's money and give it to everybody else.
Right.
Which is not quite the same. It leads to the same place, but it's not the same underlying premise.
I think
Maybe it is.
I think it is. I mean, I think that more I look at it, the more I think there is this core underlying ideology, which is an anti-modern, anti-civilization ideology. It comes from Rousseau. It's really invented by Rousseau. All Rousseau is doing is rejecting, is nihilism. He's rejecting civilization, and he's affirming anti-civilization. So he's affirming the primitive, we say Native American, but it's not quite. He never had any contact with Native Americans. Like, he had no idea of what life was like. So it was all completely imagined. And that's part of what's important here, is that this is not something that's based on practical experience. If it were, we would have abandoned communism. Nobody would have been a communist after 1917, so you
Right.
or really after the French Revolution, if you argue that sort of germinates there. But I think it was a core view of a really like a pox on all of this modern civilization. Now, you then have people that want to go and seize power. Traditionally, the left, like the early Marxist left and whatever, would be like an overthrow the government. After World War II, you get to this more of a cultural Marxism, as it's called. It's drawing on the ideas of Antonio Gramsci and of
the identity politics people.
The long march through institutions. And what's really happening is that people that share this core radical left ideology are then wrapping themselves up in a variety of other issues: civil rights, the environment, consumer interest,
What do you
public
mean by
health.
that? What do you mean by consumer interest?
Like Ralph Nader.
Okay.
I mean, Ralph Nader holds the exact same worldview as Noam Chomsky, but he created a marketing machine and a sort of image as somebody that's out there defending consumers. That would seem like the opposite of Marxism. Marxism was about defending workers against the capitalists. He didn't really spend much time thinking about consumers. And when he did, he criticized consumerism as masking the bloody underworld of production. Commodity fetishism was what he's describing. But I think it's basically the same anti-civilization nihilism that's driving it. And then the left is very creative about kind of wrapping different causes together and pushing an anti-civilization, anti-capitalist, anti-modern agenda as good for workers, good for people of color, good for migrants, good for the environment, good for women. And it's all nonsense. It's all based on an ideology of nihilism.
So the part about this, all this high flying ideology stuff that feels weird in this moment is you have a very, very wealthy city of people who make their money in kind of the most like gloves off capitalism ever. Hollywood is, I can kind of understand some of the leftism of Hollywood on the simple basis of it is a brutally competitive environment. You always have basically a bullseye on your back. You are one failure away from total disaster to never work again unless you're, obviously there's people at the top and all, but
Right.
it's so compressed. There's such a small number of companies and producers that make, and
Right.
studios that make all the money. Everyone else is like barely scraping by.
Yes.
So it is like whatever the worst criticism of Ayn Rand you've ever heard, Hollywood is in reality what that description is.
That's right.
As an experience, as someone who worked in it.
Oh, yeah.
And I actually had a great experience. I worked at Viacom for a long time. I had a great experience. Actually, I was in New York, but it's brutal. How do you have a city, and especially like these areas in particular, who overwhelmingly voted for this woman, this radical that hates them?
Right.
How does it happen? How do you have like Malibu and the Palisades, ultra wealth, voting for crazy, I hate you, white people, Marxist lunatic person, who's then just utterly incompetent in the most basic function of government? Like, don't you want your house to be standing? What's the feedback loop or lack thereof, as you understand it, going on there?
I mean, look, it's the city of angels. People, heads are in the clouds. It's a city of
There's
fantasy.
bankers in Los Angeles too.
Yeah,
it's like,
well, and they probably vote Republican. I mean, there's a great Coen Brothers movie called Hail Caesar. I don't know if you ever saw it. It's absolutely fantastic. But we forget that in the 40s and really 40s, 50s, the intellectual class, the creative class in the United States was very radical. I mean, it was very communist. I mean, there was that's why the blacklists were. I mean, it was awful, and there's McCarthy and whatever, but I mean,
was it awful?
Yeah.
was he kind of right? I'm just being honest. I mean, I'm pretty sure like everyone on McCarthy's list were communists.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of communists, right? And so communism attracts intellectuals. I think there's a lot of psychological reasons for that. Intellectuals in the United States in particular, intellectuals everywhere think they're superior. I mean, that's one of the characteristics of intellectuals. I just been studying this wonderful sociologist who helped me to understand this. But, in Europe, intellectuals are treated with a lot more respect than in fact, all over the world, intellectuals are treated with a lot more deference and respect than they are in the United States. In the United States, the intellectuals think they deserve that respect, but we are actually treated, as we should be, at the same level as everybody. You go in, your electrician, that he doesn't think that you're better than him because you work at the university. That's as it should be. I think that's the American way. It's the best way. Yeah. That's the egalitarian way, meaning equality of opportunity, not of outcome. But I think the response from many intellectuals has been, in the United States more than any other country, has been to hate the masses, to want to rule the masses, and also to want to rule over the capitalists. Because the thing you have to remember is that, against what Marx said, the capitalists, the Elon Musks of the world, the Jeff Bezos of the world, they have the same interest as their workers. They want to sell more of their products. They want their companies to succeed. They want to dominate other industries. They want to displace the industries they want to advance over the earlier technological industries. They have the same interests. The people that have a different set of interests are the intellectuals, often who depend on the state or on philanthropy. They want to rule, and they see themselves competing with those capitalists. And so you would get these writers in Hollywood that were very radical left, and some of the producers. I mean, Hail Caesar is a very funny movie because the studio owner, the capitalist studio owner, is very practical. The writers are just, their heads are in the clouds. They're talking about Marxism and Russia. Yeah. And the studio producer is very practical. So the distinction that's been around forever is that the left is idealistic and their heads are in the clouds and they're in dreamland, they're utopians, and the right are the practical, common sense, boots on the ground, working class folks. And that division is there kind of everywhere, but Hollywood is the city that creates fantasies. I mean, that's like the business of fantasy creation. So it makes sense that political culture would be so strong.
And yet, if I'm Mark Hamill and I've got like a $10+ million mansion, I might be mouthing off about left-wing nonsense on Twitter all day long. But I see that weather warning, and I remember that I know the fiery place I live in. I'm not like going in the back door and being like, hey, mayor, like, let's not let me and my friends that put you in office burn. There's like a breakdown at even the most basic level of cronyism going on. Like, maybe the cronyism is still to come when they just get all of our money to rebuild their mansions, but that still feels weird to me. Like, how is it?
That's how checked out they are. I mean, it's funny. I am myself often surprised. I mean, I had heard people tell me that Gavin Newsom was in a bubble, that he was checked out. And I was like, come on. I mean, like, you're the head of the fifth largest economy in the world. You've got the best advisors. You're on Twitter like all day long. But in fact, he is really in a bubble. They really are checked out. The people they socialize with, they surround themselves with yes people. Hollywood, I mean, it's one of the worst of that sort of cultures. I mean, you see it in the media cultures in New York and in Hollywood, where I mean, it flares up every once in a while. You know, you see like the criticisms of Ellen or one of the late night hosts. I mean, there's all these stories that come out about how poorly they treat their assistants. So there's a sort of there's a real elitism and snobbery and disconnectedness from physical, you know, real world realities. And I think that extended to the physical environments that they found themselves in.
There was a movie, I want to say it actually starred Kevin Spacey, which makes it triply kind of ironic. That was actually like inspired by the stories of assistants working for the famous producer Scott Rudin. Who
Interesting.
I think it's called Swimming with Sharks. I might be misremembering that. But yeah, Scott Rudin, Harvey Weinstein, there was people that was, and it tended to be in my observation of the business, the closer you actually got to the celebrities, the more truly psychotic everyone got. So at Spike TV and MTV, the talent department were crazy people. Like they were run ragged. Everything was, it was like the new royalty. It really was like, we need to count how many M&Ms are going to be in this bowl.
Yes, it's all that crazy
before the Scream
OCD
Award,
stuff.
all this weird stuff. It's like, and it just feels like people who are ever increasingly isolated and maladapting to that. We're so adaptable, right? So it's like you just sort of adapt to being pampered, being surrounded by yes people.
Yeah.
That sycophantic feedback loop. Which I got like, politicians must face this. If you're if you're Gavin Newsom, you're just surrounded by, I don't know who he's surrounded by, but they're not good.
No, I mean, I think the actors have got to be the worst off in that sense. I mean, I've just glimpsed it a little bit. It's horrible. And you realize like all those assistants, the fluffers and the people running around, it's, you almost get a sense that they were like in codependent relationships as kids, or they had alcoholic parents that they were sort of taking care of. And then the big star celebrities become infants, and they throw temper tantrums. They make these unreasonable demands, not almost, but as a way to sort of make people just behave, to just behave really deferentially and subserviently. It's gross. It's, as you mentioned, it's more like a primitive monarchy in those situations. And so then they then go and have this public relations of myself as this really progressive person, really concerned about uplifting people, but in their day-to-day work lives, they're just monsters often. I mean, genuine monsters in some cases with the sexual assault, certainly, but even in the more minor cases where you just hear about the emotional abuse that these celebrities put their colleagues, their assistants under, it's really quite grotesque. I keep hearing stories about it. So I think that those people, I mean, they have they're narcissists. And so that means they have a really strong sense of entitlement and a big sense of grandiosity. The other characteristic of narcissism is something called reality impairment. Well, this was a disaster. I think the fires in Los Angeles are a disaster of narcissism and nihilism, and it involved reality impairment.
If you like this clip, you should check out the full video and all the other great content we've got at Dad Saves America. So be sure to hit the like button, subscribe, and ring that bell so you won't miss our new stuff as it drops each week.